Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today, we're taking a look at something that's pretty amazing, actually. Smart fabrics.
Ah,
I think when a lot of people hear that term, they think of like, those workout shirts that like wick away moisture or whatever.
right.
But we're talking about some next level stuff here, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We're talking about textiles with technology actually integrated into the fibers, stuff that can sense things or even generate power.
It's wild stuff. I mean, you're basically wearing a computer, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And we've got a really interesting market report here that digs into the global market for this technology. It lays out where things are headed.
And that's exactly what we're going to do today, a deep dive into this report all about smart fabrics.
That's right.
I mean, this is a market it's really poised for some massive growth, and we're going to unpack all of that. We'll
Absolutely.
look at, what's driving it, what are the different types of smart fabrics, what are they being used for, and where the biggest opportunities are, for the future.
Yep, all that and more.
So yeah, just to be clear before we jump in, when we talk about smart fabrics, we're talking about textiles with technology woven in, making them capabilities beyond just being a regular piece of fabric.
Right.
So think like sensors, energy harvesting, even stuff that can change its properties, like on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like clothes with superpowers almost.
So let's start with the big picture here, the overall market. Yeah, how big is this thing and where is it going?
Well, in 2025, the global market for smart fabrics is projected to be about 2,814.5 million USD.
Okay, so not exactly small potatoes, right?
No, not at all. And get this, by 2033, it's projected to jump to 2067 37.96 million USD.
Whoa, hold on. Almost 10 times bigger in just 8 years? That is some serious growth.
It is. Yeah, it's huge.
So what's fueling that kind of expansion?
Well, the report points to a few key factors, but one of the biggest is the demand from the military and defense sectors.
Okay, for that makes sense. You can imagine all sorts of applications there for soldiers, in the field, like monitoring their health or, even like camouflage that can adapt to the environment.
Exactly. There's a lot of potential there, and it's really pushing the market forward.
So we've got this huge growth happening, but where is it happening, geographically? Where are the hotspots for smart fabrics?
So right now, North America is the leader. They're expected to have over 40% of the global market share in 2025.
Wow, over 40%, so they're really dominating.
Yeah, they are, and that translates to about 1125.80 million USD.
So why is North America so far ahead?
Well, the report highlights a couple of things. First, they've got a high level of technology adoption, across different industries.
Right, they're early adopters.
Exactly. And second, there's a lot of investment going on in research and development in this area, particularly in the U.S.
So they're really pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, and within North America, the U.S. market alone is projected to reach 888.26 million USD in 2025, with a CAGR of 30.5%.
Okay, so a healthy CAGR there.
Yep, Canada is looking at 135.1 million USD with a slightly higher CAGR of 31.5%, and Mexico is expected to reach 102.45 million USD with a CAGR of 31.2%.
So pretty consistent growth across North America.
That's right.
Now, what about Europe? How do they stack up against North America?
Well, Europe is also a major player. They're expected to make up over 30% of the global market in 2025.
Okay, so still a big chunk.
Yeah, definitely. Their market size is projected to be about 844.35 million USD with a CAGR of 31% from 2025 to 2033.
So they're keeping pace with North America in terms of growth.
Pretty much, yeah. And in Europe, it seems like they're really focusing on a few key areas. One is fashion, incorporating smart fabrics into clothing.
Makes sense. Europe's always been a leader in fashion.
Yeah, they are. And another area is the automotive industry, using smart fabrics in car seats and interiors.
Oh, interesting. So like seats that can adjust your body temperature or, even alert you if you're getting drowsy.
Exactly. And the third area is healthcare, using smart fabrics for things like monitoring patients remotely.
So it sounds like Europe is really applying this technology across a lot of different sectors.
They are, and some of the key players in Europe include the UK. Their market is projected to be 141.85 million USD with a CAGR of 31.8%.
Right.
Germany is looking at 167.18 million USD with a 31.2% CAGR, and France at 77.68 million USD with a 30.2% CAGR.
Got it.
Italy is looking at 72.61 million USD and a 30.4% CAGR.
Okay.
While Russia is projected at 130.87 million USD with a 30% CAGR. Spain, Luxembourg, and the rest of Europe are also contributing, each with their own market dynamics and growth rates.
So a lot going on in Europe.
Yeah, it's a diverse market for sure.
Now let's shift gears and head over to Asia Pacific. I mean, this is a region that's known for its, rapid technological advancements and, its huge consumer market. So what's the outlook like for smart fabrics there?
Well, Asia Pacific is definitely a force to be reckoned with in this market. They currently hold about 23% of the global market share.
Okay, so a decent chunk already.
Yeah, and their market size is projected to be about 647.34 million USD in 2025.
Right.
But here's the kicker. Their projected CAGR is a whopping 34.5% from 2025 to 2033.
Whoa, okay, so that's even higher than North America and Europe.
Yeah, they're really set to take off.
So what's driving that kind of explosive growth?
Well, a couple things are at play there. One is rising disposable incomes. People have more money to spend on things like smart clothing.
Right.
And the other is just this massive adoption of technology across various sectors in a region.
I mean, yeah, they're really leading the way in a lot of tech areas.
They are, and within Asia Pacific, China is obviously a major player. Their market is projected to reach 271.88 million USD in 2025 with a CAGR of 34%.
Okay.
Japan is expected to reach 89.33 million USD with a 33% CAGR. And India's really interesting. They're showing incredible growth with a projected market of 77.68 million USD and a CAGR of 36.3%.
Wow, 36.3%. That's remarkable.
Yeah, India's definitely one to watch.
Absolutely. So we've got North America, we've got Europe, we've got Asia Pacific. What about Latin America and the Middle East and Africa? What's happening in those regions?
So Latin America is projected to have a market share of over 5% in 2025,
Right.
with a market size of 140.73 million USD and a CAGR of 31.9%.
Okay, so respectable growth there.
Yeah, definitely. And the report mentions that growing consumer awareness is a key factor in that growth. People are starting to understand the benefits of smart fabrics.
Right. And I imagine as the technology gets cheaper and more accessible, that awareness is only going to increase.
Exactly.
And within Latin America, Brazil is expected to be the biggest market at 60.23 million USD with a 32.5% CAGR, followed by Argentina, Colombia, Peru, and Chile.
That's right.
And last but not least, what about the Middle East and Africa?
So the Middle East and Africa currently have a smaller share of the market, around 2%.
Okay.
With a size of 56.29 million USD in 2025, but they're still projected to grow at a solid CAGR of 32.2%.
So they're not being left behind.
No, not at all. And the report highlights a couple of things driving that growth. One is government initiatives, aimed at promoting technological advancement.
Right.
And the other is increasing adoption in industrial applications.
Interesting. So it sounds like they're really focusing on those practical uses, maybe more so than like consumer fashion or something like that.
Yeah, it seems that way. And some of the key areas to watch in the Middle East and Africa are the GCC countries. They're projected to reach 24.09 million USD with a strong CAGR of 33%.
Wow, 33%. That's impressive.
Yeah, it is. And South Africa is also showing good progress at 7.95 million USD with a 33.2% CAGR.
So a lot of potential there.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've covered the overall market size, the regional breakdowns, where the growth is happening. But let's dig a little deeper now into the different types of smart fabrics. What are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, good point. So the report breaks down smart fabrics into three main categories based on their functionality.
Okay, and those are...
Ultra smart fabrics, active smart fabrics, and passive smart fabrics.
All right, so let's start with the most, the most advanced sounding one there, ultra smart fabrics. What makes them so ultra?
Well, ultra smart fabrics are all about those really high-tech features, the things that really push the boundaries of what textiles can do.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, one of the big ones is energy harvesting, fabrics that can actually generate their own power.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me my shirt could charge my phone?
Potentially, yeah, that's the idea.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is. And then there's biosensing, fabrics that can detect things like heart rate, body temperature, even things like stress levels.
So it's like wearing a doctor.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's adaptability, fabrics that can change their properties based on the environment.
Okay, so like a jacket that can like warm you up when it's cold or cool you down when it's hot.
Exactly. And because of all these advanced capabilities, ultra smart fabrics are really finding a lot of use in areas like healthcare.
Right, for monitoring patients or, even providing some kind of therapeutic benefit.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's sports, for performance tracking and injury prevention.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, the military is very interested in this technology.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, you could imagine all sorts of applications there.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so that's ultra smart fabrics. Now, what about active smart fabrics? What's the difference?
Oh, active smart fabrics, they're kind of like the middle child. They're not quite as sophisticated as ultra smart fabric,
Okay.
but they're still pretty impressive. They're fabrics that can interact with their surroundings and change their properties in real time.
Okay, give me an example.
So let's say you're wearing a workout shirt made of active smart fabric. As you start to sweat, the fabric could actually adjust its breathability, which is you cool and dry.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and in the medical field, they're using active smart fabrics to create things like compression garments that can adjust the pressure they apply,
Interesting.
or bandages that can monitor the healing process.
So it's like they're actively responding to what's happening.
Exactly, and this segment is actually the fastest growing in the smart fabrics market.
Wow. Really? Why is that?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the rising popularity of fitness trackers and healthcare wearables. People are becoming more and more interested in monitoring their health and their performance, and active smart fabrics are a perfect fit for that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you can have your clothes do the tracking for you, why not?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got ultra smart fabrics, the high-tech ones, and active smart fabrics, the ones that can respond and adapt. What about passive smart fabrics?
So passive smart fabrics, they're kind of the basic level of smart fabrics. They don't have those really fancy interactive features,
Right.
but they still offer some added functionality, things like moisture wicking, antimicrobial properties, UV protection.
So more like enhanced versions of traditional fabrics.
Exactly. And unfortunately, the report doesn't go into too much detail about passive smart fabrics, their market size or growth projections.
Okay, so a little bit of a mystery there.
Yeah, kind of.
All right, so we've looked at the different types of smart fabrics based on their functionality, but what about the functions themselves? The things these fabrics can actually do.
Yeah, so the report outlines four main functional categories for smart fabrics:
And those are,
energy harvesting, sensing, thermoelectricity, and luminescent.
okay, so we already talked a bit about energy harvesting with ultra smart fabrics, but what more can you tell us about it?
Well, energy harvesting is a really exciting area because it has the potential to make smart fabrics truly self-powered, no more batteries to replace or recharge.
Right, that's the dream.
Exactly. And this is being driven by a couple of things. One is the demand for sustainability. People want eco-friendly products.
Absolutely.
And the other is just the convenience of not having to worry about power sources.
Yeah, totally. I mean, imagine if your clothes could just charge themselves, from the sun or from your body heat.
Yeah, exactly. That's what energy harvesting is all about. And it's a big reason why this segment is both the largest and the fastest growing in the smart fabrics market.
So it's like the holy grail of smart fabrics, in a way.
Kind of, yeah.
Now, what about sensing? We also touched on this a bit, but tell us more about how sensing works in smart fabrics.
Sure. So sensing is all about integrating sensors into fabrics that can collect various types of data. Things like body temperature, heart rate, pressure, even things like muscle activity.
So it's like having a built-in fitness tracker or a medical monitor.
Exactly. And this data can be really valuable for a lot of different applications, like in healthcare for monitoring patients remotely,
Right.
or in sports for tracking performance and preventing injuries,
Makes sense.
and even in the military, for monitoring soldiers' health and well-being in the field.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that our clothes could be doing all of that.
It is, yeah. And the sensing segment is growing rapidly, especially in those areas we just talked about: healthcare, sports, and the military.
Okay, so what about those last two functions? You mentioned thermoelectricity and luminescent.
Yeah, those are interesting ones, but unfortunately, the report doesn't provide much detail on them.
Really? So they're kind of like those passive smart fabrics, a little
Yeah,
mysterious.
yeah, kind of.
All right, well, we'll have to keep an eye on those and see how they develop.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've talked about the different types of smart fabrics and the functions they can perform, but now let's talk about where they're actually being used. What are the main applications for this technology?
Yeah, so the report identifies a bunch of different end-use sectors for smart fabrics. It's a pretty diverse landscape.
Like what?
Well, some of the big ones are sports and fitness, medical and healthcare, automotive and transportation protection, and safety, military fashion, and entertainment, home, and architecture, and then a general others category.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, it is. It shows you just how versatile this technology is.
So out of all of those, which one is the biggest right now?
So right now, the largest segment is sports and fitness.
Okay, that makes sense, with all the fitness trackers and smartwatches out there.
Yeah, exactly. People are really into monitoring their performance and their health, and smart fabrics are a perfect way to do that.
Right, shirts that can track your heart rate, shorts that can analyze your running gait. I mean, the possibilities are pretty endless.
They are, and that's a big reason why this segment is doing so well.
Now, what about the fastest growing segment?
So the fastest growing segment is actually medical and healthcare.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Why is that?
Well, there's a huge need for continuous and remote patient monitoring, especially as the population ages.
Right. I mean, hospitals are already overwhelmed. If you can monitor people at home and keep them out of the hospital, that's a huge win.
Exactly, and smart fabrics are perfect for that. They can be integrated into clothing or bandages to track vital signs.
So it's like having a doctor with you 20/47.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's driving a lot of the growth in this segment.
So we've got sports and fitness and medical and healthcare leading the way. But what about those other categories you mentioned? Automotive, military, fashion, home. Are they seeing much adoption of smart fabrics?
Yeah, definitely smart fabrics are finding their way into all of those areas too.
Give me some examples.
Sure. So in the automotive industry, they're using smart fabrics to create things like car seats that can adjust to your body temperature or even alert you if you're starting to get drowsy.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and in the military, they're using smart fabrics for things like advanced protective gear, with built-in sensors and communication systems.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's like a natural effect for them.
It is. And then in fashion, we're starting to see smart fabrics being used to create clothing that can change color or light up.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about functionality anymore. It's about aesthetics, too.
Exactly. And then in the home, they're using smart fabrics to create things like curtains that can adjust to the amount of sunlight or even bedding that can monitor your sleep patterns.
So it's as smart fabrics are slowly but surely infiltrating every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the market size, the regional breakdowns, the different types of smart fabrics, the functions they can perform, the end-use application. It's a lot to take in. But can you kind of sum it up for us?
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways from this report?
Sure. So I think the biggest takeaway is that the smart fabrics market is poised for some major growth, over the next decade.
Right, we saw those projections. They were pretty mind-blowing.
They were, and this growth is happening across all regions, although at different rates.
Right, Asia-Pacific is really set to explode.
Exactly. And the main drivers behind this growth are the increasing adoption of wearable technology, across different sectors, the rising demand from the military and defense,
Yep.
and the growing consumer interest in clothing that offers more than just style, clothing that can actually do things.
Right, clothing that's smart.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that this is still a relatively new market. There are challenges to overcome, like ensuring durability and washability.
Right, if your smart shirt falls apart in the wash, that's not going to be good for business.
Exactly. And there's also the issue of consumer awareness. A lot of people still don't really know what smart fabrics are or what they can do.
Right, I think there's still a bit of a perception that it's like futuristic or, something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, there is. But as the technology matures and becomes more affordable, I think that perception will change.
Absolutely.
And then there are all these exciting trends emerging, like the integration of AI and the Internet of Things.
Right, so it's not just about the fabrics themselves, it's about how they connect to the larger digital world.
Exactly. And that's going to open up all sorts of new possibilities, for personalization, customization, data analysis.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it.
It is, and it's only going to get more so as this technology evolves.
So we've got this market that's poised for huge growth driven by technological advances, increased demand and evolving consumer preferences. Sounds like a pretty exciting time to be involved in smart fabrics.
It is, yeah. There's a lot of innovation happening and a lot of opportunities for companies that are willing to push the boundaries.
Right, and we saw some examples of that in the report, with companies like Scholar Textile AG and Crystal International Group Limited. They're really leading the way in terms of developing new materials, new functionalities, and new applications for this technology.
Exactly. They're showing what's possible.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the question on everyone's mind is, what does the future hold for smart fabrics? How are they going to change our lives?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, will we all be wearing clothes that can monitor our health, diagnose illnesses, even treat conditions?
It's possible. I mean, we're already seeing clothing that can track your heart rate and your sleep patterns.
Right, and who knows what's next? Maybe we'll have clothes that can release medication or, even stimulate muscle growth.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but I wouldn't rule anything out at this point.
Exactly. I mean, the line between clothing and technology is getting blurrier and blurrier.
It is, and it's going to be interesting to see where it all leads.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we'll leave it there for today, but big thanks to you for joining me on this deep dive into the world of smart fabrics. It's been an enlightening conversation.
My pleasure.
And for all of you listening out there, if you're interested in learning more about this fascinating market, the details, the data, the projections, you can find a link to the full report in the show notes.
Definitely check it out.
And until next time, keep wondering about the future of what you wear.
And how I might wear you.
That's a good one. All right, we'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.
See ya. Bye. Bye.